Yo, this hot, this the spot, there it is pod.com. We're interviewing the best comedians, so tune in quick and get your ears receiving them. We talking about life and life to stream right to you, from the microphone right to your home, dude. Side note, this might get embarrassing, but no, don't sweat, yo, cause there it is.
Welcome to the There It Is podcast, a comedy podcast for comedians of any variety. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Jason Farr. Let's do this. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Follow us on Twitter at There It Is Pod and like us on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter at Jason Farr Jokes. Leave some comments if you are on SoundCloud listening to this. I appreciate that. Head over to the website, thereitispod.com, to read blogs and find out how you can support the podcast, which would be very much appreciated. A note on those blogs there, I am certainly not saying I am so experienced at comedy that I can impart wisdom. I'm not a guru. I haven't been doing comedy all that long, but I do like to process things and share them to encourage dialogue and encourage you to process things yourself and connect some dots on your own. I think that's good. We can help each other with that. So read up on those blogs, share them, and talk about them. Talk about them with me. Talk about them with other people. Speaking of someone with experience, though, today's guest is great. It's a fantastic interview today for you. I'm really excited to share this with you. It's good for anyone who wants to create comedy. I talked to Joe Toplyn. He is a former writer for Late Night with David Letterman and In Living Color. He went on to be the head writer for both The Tonight Show with Jay Leno and The Late Show with David Letterman. And he's done a ton of other things. In television comedy over the last 40-some years, there's not much else this man could have done. He has so many great insights on generating comedy. It's a great episode for you whether you want to write for a talk show, create sketches for your improv theater, or learn how to write stand-up jokes. We talk about all that and his book, which is titled Comedy Writing for Late Night TV, which breaks down how to create comedy pieces. When I started this podcast, it was to have interviews and guests like this one. It is great. I am so thrilled to share it with you. Without further ado, here is my chat with Joe Toplyn. Now, sir, you have done a tremendous amount of work in venerable TV shows over the years, especially being one of the first writers at the original Late Night with David Letterman. You must be really proud to see what that show has become.
I am proud. We had no idea that the show would take off the way it did. I came in about a year and a half after the show started. There were a whole bunch of writers who decided that they wanted to go on to other things, and they opened up a lot of writing slots on the staff. And I fortunately knew that one of the head writers at the time, and he invited me to submit some material to maybe get a job on the show, and luckily I did. But when I came in, there were 3 or 4 other new writers at the same time, and for most of us, it was our first job in television. But there was a little pressure because we had to do a show the next day, and none of us really knew exactly what we were doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In fact, we were scrambling so furiously for material that some of the stuff I wrote for my submission packet actually made it onto the show.
Oh, wow.
They just were looking for stuff to do. But we had a safety net, which is that the writers who preceded us on the show had really created set the tone of the show with Dave Letterman, and really created a lot of the comedy pieces that gave us a template. Like, this is the sort of thing we do on the show. Do stuff like this. So it was kind of scary, but at the same time, we did have something to follow. We weren't creating it out of nothing.
But you had something there that you can jump off of.
Yes, yeah, we had. There were Stupid Pet Tricks was a very early piece that I think Merrill Marco created that with Dave.
Yeah.
And that really, that sort of piece, it gives you the idea of, oh, okay, it's entertaining, it's fun, it's visual, but at the same time there's something a little off about it.
Yeah.
So that kind of tone we already inherited. Plus, it was on at 12:30. There was no pressure. There was no
Right.
there was no competition at 12:30.
And it was the first type of show. I mean, of course, the Tonight Show had existed for decades by this point, but it was the first 12:30 slot that late at night.
Right. It was kind of, as I understand it was kind of an experiment for NBC. Is there an audience, and will enough people want to watch this that we can make some money off it? And it started to catch on.
And I imagine before you were working there, you were doing stand-up?
No, I wore a suit. I was a financial analyst for Columbia Pictures.
Wow. So how did you even come to the conclusion that you wanted to write comedy?
I know, it's a weird kind of career change. The connection is the Harvard Lampoon. I went to Harvard and I was on the Lampoon.
Awesome.
And at the time, it wasn't quite the kind of place you go if you want to write television comedy. It was a humor organization at Harvard. It was for people who enjoyed making jokes and writing comedy and pulling pranks.
Mm-hmm. But so many amazing people came from that era. Harvard
yes. Andy Borowitz and George Meyer and Max Prost, Tom Gamble. Jim Downey was on the Lampoon when I was there.
Oh, wow. Went on
early
to do
writers of SNL.
Right, SNL.
And years later, Jim Downey was the head writer that I was talking about on Late Night with David Letterman. So,
okay.
So I knew him from the Lampoon, and that was what gave me the opportunity to get my material in front of Dave Letterman. So that's the connection. It was really, I loved comedy. I loved writing comedy, but I went to business school, and I started off on a different track. But luckily, I had that. Jim gave me the opportunity to get my material into the show, and that's how I made the sidestep into a different career.
Wow, that's really great.
It's like you'll hear from a lot of people in show business or comedy. It's just you meet people. Somebody you met 10 years ago could turn out to be working on a show and remember your work, or maybe have seen you performing stand-up, and they say, oh, maybe you'd like to submit a packet to the show. So it's like a lot of careers, a lot of jobs. It's you have to do networking. You have to just get yourself out there and meet people and impress them with what you can do.
Absolutely. In those early days at late night, I know that a lot of the tone had been set, but were you still trying to figure out what this show was going to be? Was there a lot of trial and error in creating that?
Yes. I think like any new show, you start out with a pretty good idea of what you're looking for. You have comedy pieces that you want to do, that you say, this is the sort of comedy we want to do. But you're also, if you're good and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, I think you're trying new stuff. And yeah, you just pitch an idea to the head writer, to the host, and you think, I think this is funny. I think the host will think this is funny. I think the audience will think this is funny. This is something we haven't done before. And especially if you're on at 12:30 and you're lucky, the host says, yeah, let's try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You don't do it again.
Right.
And if it does work, you say, oh, that worked. Let's do it again, but a little different. Or how about this piece that's kind of like that one, and let's try that. So yeah, you're always trying stuff that you hope will work, and if it does, that leads to other areas that you could do on the show, other areas of comedy. So yeah, it's I always try to, and I think a lot of people on the staff and Dave also always tried to keep it fresh, which means that it's very important for a show like this, if you're doing what you should be doing, to try new ideas and to try to come up with new ideas that aren't close to other things that have been done, which is getting harder and harder to do now that there are so many late night
shows now.
Pieces and jokes, and yeah.
Which is all the more reason why you must feel proud. I mean, you at Late Night were a part of creating this irreverent anti-talk show, late night talk show, and that particular aspect of the late night brand voice, which I think might very well be the most venerable show in the history of late night talk show, because it's never had a bad host. It's always been very well regarded, but it's always had that voice of irreverence. Even if you were to turn on Late Night with Seth Meyers now, you probably still see some similarities back to what you guys created back then.
Yes, Dave was very influential at setting the tone. Merrill Marco was very influential, and we just had a lot of leeway, a lot of free reign in the early days to just try different kinds of comedy, what I call short form comedy, which is a comedy piece under about 10 minutes long. So anything you could think of that you think might get a laugh that's under 10 minutes long or 5 minutes long, you could find a way to do it on this show. So yeah, Dave and his early writers really created the template that you'll see on all these shows now, really.
Right, that's true. Jimmy Kimmel is certainly a disciple of Letterman as well. For someone starting out in comedy who wants to write for a late night show one day, how should they prepare themselves to be able to work at a talk show?
Well, I think the main thing that you have to do is to prove you can write the sort of comedy that the show does. Mm-hmm. And the way you do that is your writing sample. You watch the show a lot. If you'd like to write it for a particular show, you watch the show a lot, learn the tone of the show, learn the sort of comedy pieces the show likes to do, learn the voice of the show, how edgy is it, how much political comedy does it do, and then work on your writing sample. Sometimes you can find out from a show what their writing submission guidelines are. So they might want a piece like this and a piece like that, or one of their trademark pieces. So you can put that in your packet, but you'll probably have to come up with some new ideas too. So I think the main thing is to put together a killer writing sample so that when you do get the opportunity to submit it to a show, you can jump right on the opportunity and get your material there and hopefully impress the people reading it.
From what I've understood, when you're putting together a packet, you are writing a couple of monologue jokes and then a couple of desk pieces. Is that right?
That's a pretty typical packet. Yeah, and I wrote this book on how to do it, comedy writing for late night TV, and there's
right. I want to talk to you about that. Yeah.
So one thing you could do is be working on a generic packet that has those things you talked about: two pages of monologue jokes, a couple of pages of new desk piece ideas, maybe a couple of sketches, maybe a commercial parody, maybe some games, some audience games or some celebrity games, because shows are doing those now too. So you put together a packet consisting of typical pieces that a number of different late night shows might do, and that way you can tailor the packet if you're submitting to a particular show and just take out the pieces they don't do and submit the pieces they do.
A lot of people consider comedians to be lazy. They'll say that comedians are lazy, but there has to be a lot of discipline writing for a talk show, right?
There's a really a lot of discipline if you're good at it. Yeah, because every night, assuming you do 4 or 5 shows a week, every night you have to have comedy for the next day. Every day they're going to do a show at 5:30 or 5 o'clock or 6:30 or whenever the show is taped. And you have to have something to do. So you don't have the luxury of waiting until you feel funny or
right. Until some mood strikes you or when some idea strikes you. You have to sit down and say, I'm going to write. How much writing are people on late night talk shows doing a day? I mean, it's like, I guess, how many hours are they sitting to creating something?
It depends on how well run the show is. A typical show, if a show is not well run or disorganized or it's not running as smoothly as it should, the writers can get there at 9 or 9:30 and be there at 9 or 9:30 at night. It can be like a 12-hour day. If the show is clicking along and everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing and the host is approving a lot of stuff, you can commit at 9 and be gone by 6. It can be just a typical 8-9 hour day.
That's good.
A lot of material is rejected. 90% of the stuff that the writers actually turn out never gets beyond the head writer's office, never even doesn't get pitched, or it gets shot down, or it gets shot down at rehearsal. So yeah, it is kind of a volume operation. It's quality, but at the same time, there are enough other factors that go into whether a piece is produced on a show that you just have to turn out a lot of stuff to get your stuff on the air, which is what you as a writer are trying to do.
How can somebody prepare themselves before they're working on a talk show? Like if they're a stand-up, How can they prepare themselves for that level of work? Someone wouldn't want to feel like they're being thrown to the lions. What can they do to sort of get ready to write that much? Should they just start practicing writing a lot?
That's basically it. Yeah, I think if you're going to write for a late night show, it's really good practice to write monologue jokes, because just go in, see what's happening in the news, and just turn out as many jokes as you have time for, because the ability to craft a solid monologue joke is that ability is used in creating a lot of the other comedy on these shows. When Jimmy Fallon does thank you notes, those are basically well-crafted little monologue type jokes, except they're not based on the news. They're just based on something that Jimmy's
random life
saying,
stuff.
thank you.
Right.
Exactly. But if you can write a monologue joke, you can write thank you notes. So I think that's a good way to flex your volume comedy muscles, is just practice cranking out a whole lot of monologue jokes every day, and put them on Twitter, so they don't go to waste. Just post them on Twitter and
Get stuff out there, yeah.
And Twitter can attract the attention of people who work on late night shows. You probably heard the story.
Are you talking about the one who's on Seth Meyers now?
Yeah. That's a pretty famous story that is true. He was working in IT in the Midwest, and his tweets caught the attention of somebody who worked on the Seth Meyers show, and they invited him to write a submission, and he was hired off that. And I think he's still working there.
I don't recall his name, and I recently meant to look to see if he was still there. I do remember when the show was starting, someone interviewed him, and they said, "Are you scared? Like, this was such a whirlwind thing. You were in IT." And he said, "Yeah, I'm scared. This is very random."
Everybody is scared.
Oh yeah, I think that's a good thing for people to hear, is that everybody really is scared. I mean, even the super talented people.
Yeah, you have no idea whether you can do that job until you actually have to do it. I remember I was nervous on Letterman, on Late Night with David Letterman. I was brand new to television, brand new to comedy writing, and eventually I couldn't pitch stuff that was in my submission packet. I actually had to sit in the office and come up with new stuff, and I didn't know if I could do it. And yeah, you figure it out, and you keep writing and submitting, and eventually you learn what works and what doesn't, and how to do it, and hopefully you learn fast enough that they keep you on.
Yeah, it seems like Mr. Letterman was even a little nervous, from stories I've heard, that he was maybe even a little scared too, which is fair. Certainly Jimmy Fallon was scared the first night he did Late Night. He talks about it all the time.
Sure.
So it doesn't matter how talented you are. You can still be a little scared, and that's okay.
Yes, absolutely. It does help to realize that everybody else is scared too, and you're all in it together.
I'm picking up on, it seems like you have some similarities, mannerisms-wise, with David Letterman. Have you been told this before?
I have been told that. I don't know why or how I picked him up, other than
just being around him a lot.
Working for him for like 12 years. Yeah, I wrote for him for 12 years. He was very influential on my comedy writing and my tone, because he gave me my first job, and I worked with him for so long.
So long, yeah. You briefly left Late Night, and you wrote for In Living Color. What did you do there exactly?
Well, there were a few writers at the same time as me who were thinking of moving to L.A. We were thinking, all right, we've all worked on Late Night for about 6 years. Let's try something else. And In Living Color was my first job in L.A. It was kind of a nice next job, because it used a lot of the stuff I had learned on Late Night, but it was sketches. I got a chance to write more sketches.
How did you transition from that talk show to a sketch show? I mean, I guess you did do some sketch writing at Late Night.
Yeah, it was that there was actually a lot of similarity. If you learn how to write a sketch for a late night show, and you learn how to do it the right way, and my book describes how to do it the right way. But then it's just do more of that, and also remember to build in the freshness. Like, make sure that the sketch is reflects the tone of the show and is something you haven't seen before, and also make sure that it's about something that might interest people, a subject, something in the news, or a character. And all those things are things you learn from late night TV, that you want to be joking about stuff that people care about. Otherwise, they'll be bored, or they'll they'll disagree with you and they'll just change the channel.
Was Keenan Ivory Wayans there when you were?
Oh yeah, Keenan and Damon, and
so this was early. I thought it was early before he left.
It was early in the first season. Yeah.
That is amazing. So I imagine one of the big shifts you had to make was for a talk show. If you're writing a sketch, you are sort of writing it to the personalities that are hosting the show. If you're writing for a talk show, but on In Living Color, you have a whole cast of characters or a whole cast of people, and then they have for each of them a cast of characters. So is there a shift that you have to make? And I'm writing this not just to this person's strengths, but to this specific character more often than I was before.
Well, yes, you definitely have to write for a specific character, and that's probably, in the case of In Living Color, going to be a specific character that one of your cast can do well and would enjoy doing. But we also had an opportunity to do that on Late Night with David Letterman, even as part of a comedy piece. Like, I wrote something that was a piece we called Who Asked For It, I think. And people would get up to the microphone, and they would be actors or staff members, and they would ask Dave to do certain things, and then you'd see a little comedy piece, and you could create characters for that. I created a guy who got to the microphone, and he said that he wanted to have hold a reunion of the stewardess class of 1985, and it will be at his cabin in the woods. This really seedy guy who was clearly just wanted to get a lot of stewardesses to this fake reunion at his cabin in the woods. And that was just a character that I just created as a joke in that sketch. So yeah, it wasn't always comedy pieces where Dave would play a character, or Paul Schaefer would play a character, or Biff Henderson, or somebody else.
Chris Elliott? Was Chris Elliott there?
Chris Elliott, great example. Yeah, he would write a lot of sketches. I think he mostly wrote them himself, where he would be a character. Mm-hmm. And he'd get to do that on the show, and that would be a sketch. So yeah, like I said, however you can think of that you can be funny in 5 minutes, 6 minutes, the space between commercials, you could do that on Late Night, even if it involved in creating a different character that some staff member would play, or you'd get some actor from outside to play. But it was fun going to In Living Color and just saying, here's a character, and I think Jim Carrey would be great for this, or Damon Wayans, and just see them bring it to life.
That must have been exciting to see. I mean, this was Jim Carrey before Ace Ventura, and Damon Wayans before he blew up. That must have been really exciting to be there for that experience.
It was very cool, and I came in. The pilot was really well received. I came in after the pilot, and there was a lot of excitement around the show, which is a great show to move to after Late Night, just to feel like, wow, I'm fortunate to be part of something that is fresh and different and irreverent and is getting some attention. So yeah, it was very cool.
After working for In Living Color for a little bit, you transitioned back to talk shows, first being the head writer for Leno at the beginning of his tenure at The Tonight Show. What was that experience like? I'm not trying to... This was during the time of the whole late night wars and everything, the Bill Carter book era of late night. So I'm certainly not trying to pitch you against the two and getting you to
take sides.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do that. But I do want to know how was this experience at The Tonight Show different than your experience at Late Night, aside from being a head writer?
Well, it was the hosts were different, of course.
Right.
Jay has a certain voice. Dave had a certain voice, but the similarity, I think, came in the fact that in the early days of Late Night, we felt like we could try anything. You could pitch a lot of crazy ideas, and Dave would be open to doing a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And the same thing applied to when I got to the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Jay had been hosting for a little over a year, like a year and a half, and Dave.
This is a highly regarded era of his tenure there at Tonight Show.
Well, the first for a while he did not have Dave as competition. Mm-hmm. Dave didn't get to host the Tonight Show. He went to CBS. He said, "I'm going to do an 11:30 show at CBS," which became the Late Show. Mm-hmm. So after Dave came on and started doing the Late Show up against Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Jay's ratings took a hit,
Right.
and the critics kind of pounded him.
Oh, okay.
So what that did was, instead of some shows, when that happens, the shows go crazy. Network suits kind of descend on the show, and everybody feels a lot of pressure, and you get micromanaged. But the situation when I got to the Tonight Show was more relaxed than that. It was more like Jay and other people felt that there were some areas that the show would need a little help in, the writing, maybe try some different stuff. But Jay was willing to try those things. He was willing to try new ideas because he knew that something had to be done differently, because
Right.
Dave was clobbering him. So that was similar with the early days of late night. Was just the idea that, okay, what do we have to lose? Let's try some new stuff.
Oh, that's
And
fun.
so that area, that gave it a fun vibe. It wasn't a really pressured, crazy, oh my gosh, kind of running around yelling vibe. Not at all. It was, let's try stuff.
And this was a crazy time period in late night television because everyone was getting, I mean, Arsenio existed. Chevy Chase had a show right before you were at the Tonight Show. You were with Chevy Chase. You're the head writer there.
I was co-head writer of the Chevy Chase show. Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was good. It was. I'm trying to think. Was it the first time I had ever been a part of a show? I think it was starting a show from scratch. We had our host, Chevy Chase, nice guy, was always very easy to work with, and very talented and very funny. But that's all we had. And we had an executive producer, we had me, we had the other co-head writer, and it was fun to create the show from scratch. To think about, what is Chevy good at, what does he want to do, to use that information to shape the comedy pieces, to look at the set and say, here's what I think is good about the set. We had a little model of the set, and I got to throw my ideas in there. Do we need a prop department? How big does it have to be? Are we going to do prop comedy pieces? I know that the show is, anytime you see a list of worst TV shows in the history of television.
Talk about it, but that show, I watched it and I enjoyed it. I think it was hard. No, one thing that I distinctly remember was some bit he was doing, and I just grew up loving Chevy Chase, so that might have been some of it, but there was some bit I remember. I think he threw a guy off a roof or something, or he threatened to throw a guy off a roof. I thought that was so funny at the time, and it stayed in my memory, So I feel like, if you're making people laugh, you're winning, But it was a hard time period. CBS had a show, and NBC had a show. MTV even had a show. But there were so many people who had talk shows, but there weren't enough networks that had a talk show. You know what I mean? Because Arsenio was syndicated, which is what hurt it once CBS. In some markets, Arsenio was on CBS, but when Letterman came, that changed. And in some markets, Arsenio was on Fox, and things changed. Was Chevy Chase the Fox show, or was it syndicated as well?
Chevy Chase was Fox. Yeah.
Okay.
Fox made a big bet on Chevy and the show, and unfortunately it didn't work out.
I wonder, I kind of feel like the groundwork is a little more laid now for more people to be able to have talk shows. Whereas at that time, it seems like it was a little harder for people to just get used to it and for the industry to be able to sustain it all. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's now the viability of the form of the genre is pretty established. There have been enough talk shows, enough different kinds of hosts. Talk shows, some of them have worked, some of them haven't worked. So there's been a lot of learning about what it takes to make a good show, a good late night talk show, comedy talk show. So I think people are more comfortable with the idea. What sometimes I think some hosts don't realize, or potential hosts, is how much work it is for a host. From the outside, it might seem like, oh, it's just an hour a day. You just go in and turn the cameras on and do your comedy, and you get to go home. But no, it's a lot of work for a host, and it is. Jay Leno always had this saying. He said, "It's not a sprint; it's a marathon."
Right.
You can sprint for the first couple of weeks. If you're starting a new show, you can tape a lot of field pieces and edit them so they're really tight and funny, and air those in the first couple of weeks and get a real fast start. But then you have to do a show every night or 4 nights out of the week, and it's a slog. And I think a lot of hosts that surprises them. And possibly a lot of writers too.
I think it might. So After Chevy Chase and then the Tonight Show, you were the head writer for Late Show with David Letterman. What was that experience like as opposed to your experience at Late Night before?
At that point, when I moved back to New York and worked on Late Show, the Tonight Show had been number one for a while. When I got to the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Dave was beating Jay, and when I left, Jay was beating Dave. Mm-hmm. So when I got back to Late Show, it was the mood was different. It wasn't 12:30. It wasn't a show that had no competition.
Right.
The stakes were higher. There was a lot more money involved.
And you have this new role.
Oh yeah. But at that point, I had been head writer on a couple of shows, Chevy Chase, and a co-head writer on the Tonight Show. So I kind of knew how to do that job. The tricky part was figuring out what to pitch, what kind of comedy was right for the show. Because at that point, Dave had been doing the show for many years. And even though the ratings were taking a hit, it was still kind of tricky to figure out, okay, can I still pitch this idea, or is that a 12:30 idea? Or has Dave at this point moved on from what he was doing at 12:30 and trying to figure out how to do a slightly different show? So even though it was still Dave, because the competitive environment had changed, and it was on at 12:30 instead of 11:30 instead of 12:30. That made it a different show. So that was tricky to figure out as a head writer. Where do we put our creative efforts? What direction do we go in to get the show moving in the right direction again?
What are the responsibilities of a head writer at a late night talk show?
I compare a late night talk show to a little factory. It's a little factory that produces comedy every night. So the head writer's job is basically the same as the person who runs the factory. You have to come up with the raw materials. You have to come up with you have a staff. You have to make sure they all know what they're supposed to be working on. You have to make sure they're all writing the right kinds of comedy pieces. You have to make sure the factory stays busy, because if the assembly line grinds to a halt, then there isn't comedy coming out the other end. So you have to figure out how to schedule a comedy. If you do a big prop piece and you schedule that for next Wednesday, the prop department's going to be really busy, so you wouldn't be able to do a prop piece on Tuesday. So it's more about managing your staff, making sure everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, making sure everybody is busy without being too busy, trying to get everybody out and allow them to leave at a reasonable hour by pitching the material that you want to get on the show, pitching it to the host, trying to get the stuff approved by the host, making sure that all the departments, graphics and props and the segment producers who are maybe going to come up with a celebrity to act in your piece, make sure they all know what you want and they all know it in time to get you what you want. So it's, as you might expect, there's a lot more management. And at the same time, you have to make sure the comedy's funny and
right.
The comedy is well written and well edited, and to be able to know how to fix it. If something needs a fix at rehearsal, it's good to have the experience where you can say, you know what this needs? I think the piece is 30 seconds too long. I think we can cut out this and make it tighter, and that comes with experience too. If you're a writer, what you basically do is you come up with new ideas, you write comedy, but you're basically alone in your office.
Right.
There's not a lot of group writing on a show like this in general. So you're basically just taking orders. If it's time to do thank you notes, turn in your thank you notes by 2:00, and also come up with ideas for new kinds of pieces.
That's good insight to what a head writer is doing at a talk show. Take me through a day to what's going on at these shows, just the general routine.
Okay. Well, it kind of depends on the show. But in general, the big question at the beginning of a day is, do we have comedy for that day's show? Sometimes something will happen, actor will fall through, or maybe the host won't have approved comedy that you all thought he was going to approve the night before. So in that case, the first order of business is let's all come up with ideas. What can we do on the show that we can air at 5:30? If the comedy is, even if most of the comedy is set, usually there is comedy that you write that day based on something that happened in the news, something that happened at the Republican convention, maybe somebody saw some video clip that they say, oh, let's do this to the clip and create a little comedy piece out of it. They'll write those pieces in the first couple of hours of the day. They'll turn in those pieces to the head writer. At some point late in the morning, the head writer will go into the host and pitch the new stuff that came in for that day, and maybe you'll get a couple of pieces approved. then if you were the one who wrote the piece, or a piece that is being approved, that has been approved and is going to be on the show, then you're in charge of producing the piece, which means you get the word, oh, this crazy thing you wrote an hour ago, now we're going to do it on the show, so make it happen. So you have to, if you need an actor, you have to cast it. If you have to go out on the street and tape something, you have to talk to the director, talk to the person who schedules crews, get a camera when you need it to shoot the footage. If it's a tape piece, you'll have to make sure you have edit time and make sure you have time to sit down with an editor to supervise the editing session. You have to choose the sound effects. If there's a prop to be made, you have to make sure the prop department knows, this is the prop, here's the script, please make it, when can you have it done? So if you're involved in producing a piece for that night show, that's the next, say, 3 hours of your day. That goes into rehearsal time. Rehearsal is usually 2:30 in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And that's when, if you're producing a piece, say you're in an edit room, the director starts calling you saying, how's that commercial parody coming? You got that yet for rehearsal? Sorry, no, it's going to take a little, and you kind of update the director about when the ETA is for that comedy piece. Sometimes comedy pieces don't get done until literally, I remember on the Tonight Show, we were having horrible problems in the edit room. Machines were breaking. And Jay I think Jay watched the piece in the control room before the show.
Oh, wow.
Just watched it, but he had no chance to
say, like, hey, this needs to be, he couldn't make any changes.
He couldn't make any changes. It just went from the control room to Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
He just knew how happy or upset to be about it before.
It was, I should have avoided that somehow, but it was just a very tough edit. So if you're involved in producing a comedy piece, that's what you're doing. If you're not, then you're probably working on assignments. On Late Show with David Letterman, often it was the top 10 list. You'd get the topic, you'd write topics, everybody would submit topics, turn them in about 11 o'clock, and around 1 o'clock you'd find out which topic you were doing, and you'd turn in jokes for that.
Oh, interesting. So not only in a writing staff, not only are there divisions, people who are just writing this kind of thing, and then maybe some people who are writing various things, but then also you're given topics. You don't necessarily pitch. It's not only I pitched this, it's right about this. Right.
It's there aren't really divisions in the writers except when it comes to monologue.
Okay.
If you're someone who mostly writes monologue, some staffs have dedicated monologue writers. Other staffs have all the writers writing everything. But if you're a monologue writer, the first part of your day is writing jokes. And in fact, on the Tonight Show, monologue writers, that was 90% of their day was writing jokes for that long topical monologue that Jay did every night. Mm-hmm. But other than the monologue writers, the division between the writers is basically, if you have something to produce for that day, you're going to be producing comedy. You're not going to be writing top 10 lists. If you're not producing comedy for that day, you're coming up with new ideas. You're writing the assignments. When you pitch an idea, you'll write it down on a piece of paper with the premise of the idea, what the piece is called, and 3 or 4 sample jokes. And if it's approved, a lot of times that piece of paper will just get sent around to all the writers. So they'll look at it and say, oh, okay, this is the piece we're working on. Jokes by 3 o'clock. Okay. And you'll start writing the assignment. You'll start filling jokes into that piece. Or you can write something all on your own. You can write a commercial parody. And if it gets approved, then that's your piece. It's written by you, and you get to take ownership of it. And that's a satisfying part of working on a show like this is many times you get to write something, produce it, and see it pretty much exactly as you wrote it on air, which almost never happens in sitcoms. I also worked on situation half-hour comedies, and there's so much group writing, there's so much rewriting that you don't have quite that degree of ownership of the final product unless you're at the very top, unless you're the showrunner, the executive producer.
Oh, interesting. Well, after you left the late night world, you did some producing at the hit series Monk. How did your background in writing prepare you to be a producer?
On a show like Monk, a 1-hour drama or a sitcom, the producer titles, it's basically a form of, everybody's a writer. Unless you get to be an executive producer or even a co-executive producer, sometimes everybody's in the room writing. As a producer, if you're a showrunner, the classic showrunner is an executive producer who not only supervises the writing, but also it helps choose the locations, has a voice in the casting, it sits in on the final edit to make sure the show is edited properly. On Monk, the writing was all done in New Jersey, and so the creative part, the writing was in New Jersey, and the physical production was out in Los Angeles.
Right.
So there was even more. So there wasn't one showrunner who was in charge of both the physical production and the writing. It was divided between two people. So I was a producer on Monk and eventually a co-executive producer, but because we were all the writers in New Jersey, only about 1 month a year was I actually physically in Los Angeles.
Wow.
The writers would rotate out there to be on the set. There always has to be a writer on the set because things come up. We need a line for Monk when he crosses the living room, or this scene doesn't make sense. What can we cut it? And then the writer has to be able to answer those questions. So then you do kind of have your producer hat on when you're out there. You're really close to the rubber meeting the road, and the sun is setting, and we don't have time to shoot this scene. Can we shorten it a little bit? Questions like that. But otherwise, most of the time on Monk, I was in Summit, New Jersey, in a writer's room, and it was great.
So if you're producing for a show, you're almost burning the candle at both ends then. You were there for the creation of the episode from a writing standpoint, but then on set, you were more like the head writer saying, oh, we need to get this moving along, or this piece needs to get cut for this reason, or it can't get cut for that reason. I mean, your time as a head writer and a writer will really sharpen the skills of producing a scripted television series.
Absolutely. My experience on all these late night shows of actually sitting down in edit rooms and answering questions of is this actor right for this part, or what's wrong with this prop, or does this close up show the name of the funny product on the can so we'll get the laugh. All those hands-on details you really learn on a late night show. And it was immediately applicable to being on set shooting Monk episodes. Many times the director would wave me over and say, we need a line, or this line doesn't make sense. Or Tony Shalhoub, who played Monk, would say, I'm just sitting in the restaurant thinking about my dead wife. What would I be saying? And then you're back on a late night show. You're pitching ideas because it's a late night show is it's a volume operation. This doesn't work, try this. This doesn't work, try that. So that was the late night shows were great practice for being on set.
I heard Tony Shalhoub was a really sweet guy, or is a really sweet guy.
Very, very nice guy. Oh, such a great guy. Always elevated the material, made it much funnier than it had any right to be. Always very respectful of the writers. And we respected him in turn because he really knew the character of Adrian Monk very well, and occasionally he would say, I don't think Monk would do this, and usually he'd be right. Writers would talk about it. The showrunner would in New Jersey would all kick it around and would say, yeah, that Monk wouldn't do that, and we'd rewrite it. So he really protected the character in a great way. And actually, all the actors did that. There's
a really good cast.
Yes, they were great, and they all protected their characters and made sure that the characters were consistent, and we didn't make them do anything crazy or give them lines of dialogue that their characters wouldn't say. So they really helped a lot. They were terrific. We were very lucky.
Yeah, you got to see a lot of amazing things up to this point in your career. I mean, that's really exciting and cool.
Oh, well, I've been fortunate, and I've had a lot of fun, and I like to think I also enjoyed it along the way, that I didn't take it too much for granted.
It's hard not to do that, though. It's hard not to take it for granted. I guess you were seeing amazing things that it's a little bit harder to like take for granted, but I feel like in my personal life, I realized recently that I'm looking back at the early years of me doing stand-up and saying like, oh, that was so great. Whereas at the time I was just like, yeah, just living life.
Yeah. it's something occasionally you just have to step back and say, wow, I'm doing something I enjoy. This is fun. And how many people get to say that?
Yeah, not many.
I was shooting an episode. I was the writer on the set when the entire crew was shooting an episode of Monk, and we were in Hollywood, and we were at the corner of a Hollywood and Vine, and the director turns to me and he says, "Look at this! We're shooting the TV show at the corner of Hollywood and Vine." I said, "It's great, isn't it?" And we both kind of shared that moment of, "Wow, this is fun." In that scene, there was a scene where Monk was doing something in the foreground, and in the background there was something else happening. And the director, a great guy, turned to me and said that after the scene was shot, does that look okay? And I said, well, I think it was great, except how about a shot where like we have both Monk and the action background on the same shot? And he said, okay, good. And he actually took my note and got that shot for Monk, and that was the shot that we used in the show.
Oh,
so
fun.
That's another example of how being on late night and being down in rehearsal and seeing a comedy piece being produced, you learn what to look for and how to get shots that you don't have and make sure that the piece is as funny as it can be.
Well, you mentioned your book, which is Comedy Writing for Late Night TV. Remind us what you go through. You said you show how to write a sketch correctly, and what else did you mention?
Well, the book is called Comedy Writing for Late Night TV, available on Amazon. And what it basically does is it allows someone who has an interest in short form comedy, it allows them to learn all the tools they need to write the sort of comedy on a late night show, which in general is short form comedy. It's any comedy piece that you can do that's under 10 minutes long. Everything from a monologue joke to a sketch to a commercial parody to a field piece, which is where you put the camera at a location and you get comedy out of the location, audience games. So if you're interested in writing for late night television, this book tells you how to do it, how to assemble a writing sample, and then what to do with the writing sample after you're done with it. So it takes you through the whole process in great detail. It's everything I learned about writing and producing short-form comedy in my years of late-night television. But even though it's called Comedy Writing for Late-Night TV, the book is also great for anybody who wants to create comedy like this for a different medium, for how to write jokes on Twitter, how to do a funny sketch and put it on YouTube, how to do a hidden camera prank and put that on YouTube, how to write a sketch for your sketch comedy group. So it's over and above a book about how to write comedy for late night TV. It's a book about how to write comedy. What it doesn't cover is story. Like if you're going to write a sitcom or you're going to write a comedy feature film, learning how to write story is another whole set of skills that you can add on top of what's in my book. But this is really, I like to think of it as one of the most practical guides to writing comedy that has ever been published, just because I did go out of my way to make it extremely clear and extremely practical. It's based on a class that I've been teaching at the People's Improv Theater in New York on late night comedy writing. I created an outline for the course. I figured out how to teach how to write a joke. What does a writer's brain go through when he or she writes a joke, and how do I teach that? And so based on that, I elaborated on the course. I figured out how to teach the material, and I thought that a book might be a good thing to write for people who couldn't take the course and were interested in how to write this sort of comedy.
Well, I can't wait to read it. I had this stack of books that I'm at the bottom of, and I said, what's going to be the next comedy-related book for me to nerd out about and read? And that's going to be it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. Well, at the end of the podcast, I like to create something with the guest, basically so I can learn how to do it.
Okay.
What's something we could create together here? I guess a monologue joke or a sketch idea or what?
Sure, let's figure out a monologue joke.
Oh, great. I'm super excited to do that with you.
Okay. The first question you ask is, what's in the news? What are people talking about? What are the big stories?
Well, obviously Trump. It's the week of RNC, so
Convention
a lot of people.
ended. Okay. Ted Cruz betraying Trump supposedly at the convention.
Yeah, that was a huge story.
Roger Ailes out at Fox for sexual harassment.
Yeah, and Melania ribbing the plagiarism.
Right.
Those are the big.
Okay.
Those are the big things this week.
Normally what I'd do is I'd actually go into the news like abcnews.com or cnn.com and find out what the big stories are and literally what happened today. But let's just invent something.
Okay.
Or also Hillary getting ready for the Democratic convention next week.
Yeah, she's getting ready for that.
Let's start with that because that's kind of a general news item because she's going to be getting ready all until Monday. Mm-hmm. So okay, Hillary. All right, Hillary. Where's the convention? Remind me.
I actually don't know where is hers going to be in the same place as Ohio. Like I know it's.
I don't know. I should know this. Okay, Hillary getting ready for the Democratic convention.
There is she's looking. Apparently, there's a story she's looking at Cory Booker for VP. As well, so I guess one or the other.
I wrote a joke, mentioned VP. I went down the list of her VP candidates, and one of them was the Secretary of Agriculture. And I said, that makes sense because she's been having a lot of problems with her blackberries. Okay. Cory Booker is, and he was
a senator, was it New Jersey? Yeah, New Jersey.
Okay, senator from New Jersey. Is he okay? Okay. Hillary Clinton apparently considering Cory Booker, senator from New Jersey, for her vice president. Okay, and then you think about, okay, what do I think about when I think of Cory Booker? New Jersey, his name Booker, and then you think of what do I think of when I think of Hillary? I think of email, private server, pantsuits. Depending on your feelings about Hillary, you can think about other things too.
Right. Yeah. And then, of course, people bring up her husband and his sex scandals.
Bill. That's right. You also think of Bill Clinton.
Yeah, and I guess Roger Ailes can come into that.
Roger Ailes. Sure. Okay. Okay, Bill, is there a way we can link Bill and Roger Ailes? Okay, Hillary's at the convention. She's very busy preparing for the convention. And what I do is I'm very sloppy with the joke at first, just to get the pieces.
Yeah, you got to think about all the different aspects of it, right?
And then just if you get the rough idea, then you can edit it later. So maybe the joke is, Hillary's been very busy, and that leaves Bill with a lot of free time to go hitting on women with
Roger Ailes.
The general idea is she's so busy that leaves him a little time. Bill's been busy too.
Right.
He's who could he be hitting on with Roger Ailes? Hitting on? Oh, who did Roger Ailes hit on?
Megyn Kelly was one, and Gretchen.
Gretchen Carlson. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's having his own private convention with Roger Ailes and Megyn Carlson and Megyn Kelly. Something like that. Bill's getting together with some political experts too. He's going out with Roger Ailes to hit on Megyn Carlson or Megyn Kelly.
Yeah.
I think there's something in there.
I think there's something there too.
Yeah, that could be a joke.
When you're writing for Twitter, since you have to do it in 140 characters, how do you find the best way to sort of whittle it down? Are you just saying, well, what words can I cut?
Twitter is tricky because when I first started posting jokes on Twitter, I spent way too much time just, what do I need this comma and how do I abbreviate million just to get into the stupid 140 character limit. Mm-hmm. But then I realized, well, if I'm going to write a joke that fits in Twitter, it can't be a very complicated topic. It has to be a topic that you can just state in a short sentence. And also it has to have handles that are pretty clear, like Hillary Clinton getting ready for the Democratic convention. It's very clear. It's not complicated. You don't have to explain a lot to set up the joke. So that would be a good topic for a Twitter joke. So it starts from selection of topic. You can't do anything too complicated. Mm-hmm. You don't have the room. And then, yeah, at some point it does get into how do I word this joke as economically as possible. But that should be true of any joke, even if you're performing a joke on television, on a late night show, or writing a thank you note. One of the main comedy editing tools you use is shortening the joke as much as possible. Take out any extra word, any extra syllable, just to make the joke as surprising as possible. If the joke is short, people can't get ahead of you and anticipate the punchline, because if they're ahead of you, they won't think the punchline is funny. They won't be surprised. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Twitter's a great exercise. It forces you to keep the joke short, which is something you should be doing anyway.
Yeah, exactly. You cut a lot of fat.
Yes, you cut a lot of fat. You don't give the audience a chance, the audience's attention chance to wander. You force them to, before they can be thinking about what they're going to have for dinner tonight, you've gotten all the information into their brains and sprung the surprise punchline on them and gotten your laugh.
I just saw that the NBA pulled the 2017 All-Star Games from North Carolina over the anti-LGBT legislation.
Right.
Can we mine that for comedy at all? How would you approach that? It's something sports related, but also politically related.
Yeah. Well, there are techniques in my book for how to mine a story like that. One thing you could do is ask a question. Where else are they going to play the game?
There's talk about Philly. The governor wants to move it to Philly.
Yeah. Well, by asking the question, that's a way to. What you try to do is you come up with an answer that is surprising but is connected somehow to something in the topic. Like, what else do you think of when you think of LGBT? What else do you think when you think of basketball? This is the All-Star game. Who is on the team?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I guess you can say there's been so much moving around. This isn't the funny part, but there's been a lot of moving around for players. Like Dwayne Wade just moved to another team he went to Chicago, and then.
Oh yeah, right. Okay.
So there's a lot of moving around in the NBA. Maybe there's some way to reference that.
Yeah.
You could say they're moving to Philly, which will be good for the NBA since no one else in the NBA wants to go to Philly.
Sure. Yeah, if you think people think that way about Philly, then that's a great joke.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. Let's call it there.
That's the process.
That was great. I was so thrilled to have you on. It was great to talk to you.
That was fun. Thank you for asking me.
What an insightful interview. Very fun. Really enjoyed talking to him. I love getting to talk to people like Joe Toplyn. He was doing a lot of work, and it is hard work, but he made it sound practical as long as you put in the right amount of discipline and effort. We can do it. We can accomplish this. We learned so much from listening to that. Very accomplished man. This is cool. I love doing that. Buy his book, Comedy Writing for Late Night TV. It will teach you how to write monologue jokes, desk pieces, sketches, parodies, and the like. You can find it on Amazon, and let me just tell you, it really has a lot of great reviews on there. I mean, every book, even a good book, has some 1 or 2 star reviews. Not this book. It comes that highly regarded. There were 0 1 and 2 star reviews. I don't even think there were any 3-star reviews. It was like 94% 5-star reviews from a lot of people. That's saying something. So if you want to do this kind of work or get better at writing comedy in the improv theater you're in, you should read this book. I know I will. Follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Toplyn. That's Toplyn. Also, go to his website, joetoplyn.com, for more insight into how to write comedy. He has great blogs there, and even a section where he breaks jokes down. He picks a favorite joke of the week, and he explains why it's a good joke. It's very educational. It's very cool. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at ThereItIsPod and at JasonFarJokes. Like us on Facebook and go to thereitispod.com for more info on the show and how you can overcome theiritis through supporting the podcast. More episodes of There It Is will help your theiritis from flaring up too much. So please support so I can keep on doing this. May you all have theiritis. Well, there it is, another episode of There It Is. The next couple of episodes are very exciting. I can't wait to tell you about them. I'll see you next Tuesday. Until next time, be good to each other.
The music for the theme song was created by Neil Brooks. The rap was written and performed by Nick Acevedo. The logo for There It Is was created by Jeff Prater. The There It Is podcast is produced by Jason Farr.